Landscape. Find me a place where stories have grown old and wound about the lands where they were told in other times, so that they seem as one with all that lies beneath the foreign sun, like vines that grow on warm and weathered stones, or veins that stretch about their living bones. Or lie to me, say this is that place, and in that story you and I will trace the past that never was, so that this seems a land where tales have been told and dreams have passed without a break from distant ages, written to survive their yellowed pages. But when this is a place where stories dwell, we might recall that others used to tell their tales. Embers rose to light the sky above the lands where they would live and die, here between the mountains and the seas, and words curled round the rivers and the trees. All are lost, but we may glimpse their ghosts at times, flitting round the lonely coasts in mountain gorges when we know to look, or call them from the pages of a book that gathers fragments like it gathered sherds, to recreate a world of missing words, as if the land held pasts that it has known, inviting us to write it with our own. They'll rise for a moment, mute and wan. They reach to us, uncertain, and be gone before we know an individual face. Words no longer hold him in this place. And this is called Rewind the Film. I wish I had a film of you. I'd love to see you move again, to see the gestures that I knew when you were here, as we were then, and know I'd not forgotten what was true of you and what was not. I'd watch as if through window panes, and you still moved beyond the glass, knowing memory remains, although the years and lives must pass, and from your movements could infer the unity of what you were. Perhaps I'd hear your voice again, if no more than a sound or two, and know it as I knew it when we rested on the grass, and you would close your eyes and feel the sun, as if the end had not begun. I'd know that what I heard and saw was not the shadow of my mind, and know you almost as before, when in the outward form I'd find the creature that I couldn't see or hear, and all you were to me, as if I felt a wind that blew across that insubstantial day, or sun illuminating you, because I felt the sunlight play on flesh, and though the hours pass, had reached the world beyond the glass. And then this is called Wilderness. It's inspired by my love of and my fear of nature, and my belief in the power of art. Wilderness. We separate the trash these days and use a well point on the garden, planted now for the birds and insects flitting through the changeful air. We read of ice collapsed in waves and turn lights off when not in use. We take tote bags when going shopping. All the usual things we do. But there are times, observing nature's ways, I'd sooner pave it all, and end these rounds of life and death in something pleasant, like a plaza. Birds would fly, or forms of birds, as if their golden feathers felt the winds, and marble beasts would pace the land below, their eyes of jewels. Lions would roar, like blood still flowed, but drinking dare not start in fright, and whales would rise from burnished oceans, ageless under wheeling skies. This is Under Saturn. It's about what lies beyond our reach. I see us in a vernal land, where seedless flowers bud and bloom round guardless towns, where generations pass untroubled by the tomb, where untilled fields give up their fruit, and oak trees flow with honey. And there, where Saturn has returned, and orders live in harmony, where wolves lap streams by careless flocks, I'd live with you as we would be, where untilled fields give up their fruit, and oak trees flow with honey. In my poems, I try to emphasize a reciprocity of relationships between minds, to reach towards another's experience. This is about those who observe my world. It's very brief. It's called The Blanket Man. He wanders through the twilight of the suburb. House lights glow amid their creaking trees, and smells of cooking mingle on the winds as he goes by, a blanket round his shoulders, walking roads that only lead away beneath the stillness of a fading sky. These poems have all been from what I've been organizing as the first section of my book, which is about looking at life from different angles. This is the last poem in the section. It considers the instability found in a single experience. It's called The House on the Hill. Who would choose to live in a house like this, but those who've watched the endless plains and found no life beneath their sun or moon, no shelter from the heat or sweeping rains? Who would choose to live in a house like this, but those who've known no other? On a hill, as if to watch the plains a little further, it might appear serene when all is still. But clouds amass, and winds begin to moan, and deep within the hill foundations groan, and we must bar the windows, bar the doors, and though the storm still blows, replace each stone, so winds to come may find no further purchase. Little's left intact, a house remains, though who would choose to live in a house like this? But those who've watched the endless plains and found no grasses reaching to the sun, no circling birds to tell of death below. But there's a storm to come, and it will fall, and then where will we go? Where will we go? The second section considers death and mortality. This is for my cat, Katie. It's called Elegy 8. Goodbye, my small grey cat, my watchful cat, who found the house and chose us for your own, and played with other cats on morning walks, and in the halls at night when we were young. Goodbye, my small grey cat, who travelled here with damaged teeth and allergies to treat, to rest in safety, curled beneath your blankets, flexing paws as trusted steps approached, or dropping lightly to the porch's floor amid your catnip mice. A world remained, though years and lives went by, an understanding in a feline mind as you observed us, sunk in winter's rough, or stretching in the warmth of summer suns. You chose us for your own, and you were happy. Let me think of that. Goodbye, my small grey cat, my watchful cat. I read this at my dad's funeral, though it was written before. It's called To Wake the Dead. So I'll just have a drink. We'll sing to those who cannot hear, or if they hear, we cannot know. We'll sing to them and tears will flow, for all we held and still hold dear, and all that we must still forget. But in the middle of our song, imagine those for whom we long have heard us, though they're sleeping yet. They hear, they wake, they rise again to move among us as we play. Stay, my loves, they cannot stay, and life can't be as it was then. Too soon the notes no longer play, and we must take ourselves to bed, to sleep as if among the dead, then wake to meet a silent day. This was written for my dad. It's called After the Funeral. The sky is blue beyond the sliding doors, with tufts of clouds dispersing as they pass above the chattering world. As on the days we'd go to Fishhook Beach, and Dad would take us diving off the rocks, to swim with goggles over sunlit sand, and shoals of tiny fish would flicker by. Or days he'd spend when still a boy, with friends along a river's marshy banks, as fat Platana watched from shallow pools, and life held secrets yet to be explored amid the rustling reeds, with parents waiting at adventure's end. Or days when children laugh again outside and hurry on, excited by the life that lies ahead, as tufts of clouds disperse, and there's no one to tell them what there was. In the third section of the book, as I've collected it, gathered it, I concentrate on animal experience. This is called Indian Hawthorn. The bees are buzzing in the flowers as she dozes where she sits, half beyond the passing hours, soothed by busy humming. It's the height of spring, and on a breeze there drifts the scent that calls the bees, though what antennae I might perceive must be quite other than she knows, like their lenses as they weave amid a world that never shows itself to her. How strange it seems. The bees are busy as she dreams. This is called Dogs Are Playing. It's inspired by childhood experiences in Kirstenbosch and Newlands Forest with our dogs. Dogs are playing on the mountainside, 2 dogs and children in a forest stream that ripples down from pool to rocky pool, parting leaves to pass as in a dream to other clearings, called by sounds and smells of forest life and by adventures read, in shared and yet diverse experience, to travel on and know what lies ahead. As in a dream we pass to other worlds, accepting the reality of all we meet, beguiled by their strangeness though we are. Uncertain of what might befall, we reach a forest glade, a secret lair, turning stones to see what's hidden there, listening to the calls of forest birds, bright and piercing in the humid air, as water ripples coolly round our feet, towards the sea, far from where it rose in mountain depths, tannin-stained yet sweet, with much to tell the snuffling canine knows. But what was told, what adventures known, like children's tales of which you weren't aware, mingling words with waterfalls and leaves, but which to be required your presence there. And if I found my way back there today, and dreamt again of all that there might be, along the stream beyond unparted leaves, what would I dream but you were there with me? This is from the 4th section, which considers other times and cultures, both for their own sake and for the revitalizing effect they can have on our world. This is words for Stuart Payne, which I almost pronounced correctly. It begins with an epitaph from him after he was coming back from the funeral of his first wife. He says, "And we perceived a thing that looked like a little child as it sat upon the salt pan." Just get that right. Something will remain to mark the loss, gathered here, far from all we knew, and guarded in this village by the sea, the songs of lands where I was born and grew, and killed, yes, killed, and it was self-defense. The judge knew it was so when I was brought before him, following the journey south from where we sang, where in my life we caught the water bull, and rain fell where we willed, where still when rains return the fields bloom with many colours, and fill the air with smells like honey, far, so far from this, my home beneath the mountains. I must leave and look for those I knew while I have breath. My chest is growing weak and I should stay, I'm told. But even in this village, death will come. It found him here, the friend who wrote my tales. Now it's found another friend. The letter came to us some days ago. He knew the past, and soon there'll be an end to stories told in our shamanic dreams. I want to find my family and the songs where they survive amid the grass and bush, somewhere in the land while it belongs to them and they to it, and where our language will remain the medium of life a little longer. I have no illusions. There will be no moderation of the strife between the peoples, and we'll not win this conflict. When commandos came, we felt our blood turn into smoke, the smoke surrounding us in which we fought. But I have seen it flood the ground when they departed. I've heard the guns and seen the fences, seen diminished herds. There's not the blood remaining in our people to guard us from the future. I leave my words with you who learnt my language, with you, her sister and his wife, your children and this place, this oak-lined street, this portion of that city by the sea, the ruin of my race. A world is lost, and yet the words will keep a glimpse of our existence at its end. Is that not so? They will be understood. Or is it on our world that they depend for understanding? But there's no time for more, and you who mourn will understand my need for what I've lost. I'll travel to Calvinia and follow news and rumors where they lead, and hope to find my children somewhere under speaking stars where we'll have much to sing. They'll tell of life across that arid land, and listen to the stories that I bring of you, and in the spring we'll feast on corms of wildflowers. Today it's time to go, but I may come again, bringing tales I found, so in the future people know what has been lost. No longer in their language, something in the stories will survive. They'll reappear in unfamiliar forms, the ghosts of a tradition once alive. This is called The Euterpes. It's a short poem inspired by the first surviving complete song, which has lyrics, which I use part of them as an I use part of them to begin the poem. I am a tombstone, an image. Sekilos placed me here as a long-lasting sign of deathless remembrance. Sekilos to Euterpe. The melody plays, rippling through its ancient scale, as chiseled on the chosen stone and settled in a graveyard of a city, rich with Roman trade and fruitful fields, as if the stones still stood beneath the sun, and mournful figures passed among the tombs, and columns marked with names, and bright reliefs that told the worlds they lived and they were loved. I end the section with The Sailor's Shirt, which is a poem about coming back to the present. I begin with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. We live only in the present, in this fleet-footed moment. The rest is lost and behind us or ahead of us and may never be found. Winds moan through gathered masts, as clouds are hurried through the sky to far-off lands where cities guard their tales, as loved ones say goodbye to those who'll travel storm-swept seas where godless sailors weep for sin. And I pull on a linen shirt and feel it settle on my skin. We'll come to rest on coral shores, past latitudes where oceans roil, and shattered ice is tossed on sunless waves as sleepless serpents coil. And there we'll meet with learned minds and delve the secrets of the djinn. And I pull on a linen shirt and feel it settle on my skin. The rest of the poems are from the fifth and last section, which is mostly the newest section and my favorite. This is called Grass and Earth. It's about a happy moment, though also about the difficulties in sharing that moment, especially in senses that the English language hasn't really developed an extensive vocabulary around. Grass and earth. Who'll know the smell of this grass and earth, or feel these winds from what I write of them? What words tell these things? Our language has been shaped by sight and sound, and though I call them rich or fresh, what is it that I mean? You'll understand me differently. We have no categories like green for telling this. To call you here, to smell the compost laid on sand, or know the movements of the grass of this instead of other land, where roots descend and tiny creatures crawl to feel the soft winds blow, and know the smell of this grass and earth, and rest where words have yet to go. This is Babylonian thought about finding a new presence in the distant past. This day you watch without enthusiasm might, to future antiquarians, seem lovely as a day in Babylon, with water sparkling in its broad canals, and these unwanted chores would speak of life, as if they were the errands of a scribe who wandered high-walled streets through skirted crowds as Shamash drew the sun across the heavens. Ducks in a Garden, Cape Town, begins with a quote from Douglas Reed Skinner's Picking Oranges. Your seeing changes everything. Ducks are rootling grass, still damp with dew, as sunlight glows from a cloudless sky, gleaming on the leaves of cup of gold that tremble around a false acacia's frame. I play no part, but this would not have been were I not here to glimpse the peaceful scene. I watch them pace beside a garden wall, busy in their vivid tactile world, beneath hibiscus, open to the sun, as morning's chatter drifts among the trees. I play no part, but this would not have been were I not here to glimpse the peaceful scene. Revolutions. It came from a moment at my home about finding peace in a moment, beyond worries as you might find in the stillness of a work of art, as Keats described. A goose stands one-legged on a chimney, head on breast beside a gibbous moon of ghostly white in blue and golden light as earth revolves to noon. There's no sadness here among the roofs, or in the light and shadow of the trees, beneath the moon, beside a goose that stands unmoving as a frieze, where figures dance as if their world endured, and they might pass beneath the gibbous moon of ghostly white, in blue and golden light, as earth revolves to noon. This is called Into Town. It's set on Nelson Mandela Boulevard in Cape Town, or just outside Cape Town. A line of palms divides the motorway, and when it's windy and the sun is bright, the palm fronds buck and sway and catch the light, like waves that glimmer in the wind-blown bay, or plastic shaped to somebody's design, in buildings that appear as cars descend towards the town, around the mountain bend and down, past fronds that change as if a sign that what awaits is not what lies behind, and drivers' spirits lift. Not knowing why, they feel the promises of days gone by, when they might travel into town to find a holiday's amusement with their friends, or glimpse a time when such a thing might be, that here, between the mountains and the sea, their lives might yet be turned to other ends. Palm fronds buck and sway and catch the light. The day is windy and the sun is bright. This is called Cucumbers. Inspired by the title I'm using at the moment, which is The Sun, the Moon, and Ripe Cucumbers. And it's about the goodness of life. Cucumbers. Consider cucumbers. I have one here. and slice it through its emerald skin to smell the freshness, crisp and cool. I cut it through again and hold the slice towards a window, seeing fibers in the glowing flesh as if beneath the microscope, with nutrients drawn from soil and sun and irrigation. Nature and humanity in harmony, carried here across 3,000 years to burst between my teeth, or slice in neat white sandwiches, or with tomatoes in a bowl, to eat when summer's at its height, and friends are gathered, yes, and laughing. This is called Mulberry. It begins with a quote from the Bible from 2 Samuel 5:24. And let it be when thou hearest the sound of a going in the tops of the mulberry trees, that then thou shalt bestir thyself, for then shall the Lord go out before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. Mulberry. Mulberry leaves the gold about my head, filled with summer light, or flecked with shade of twigs and other leaves, shimmering gently round the furrowed trunk that sinks beneath the sand, its roots extending under grass as moles and tiny insects tunnel and crawl, and nutrients are drawn towards the leaves and drifting branches. Doves may settle there, observing me, and squirrels scurry along their dappled paths. The tree holds many worlds beside its own, multiplicity on which to dream in search of understanding. Fruit will swirl there, stained with lover's blood. And in the murmurs of the leaves and branches, you may hear the passage of your God, who moves ahead of you against your foes. I've got 2 more planned. This is called Tourist Bus, Long Street. For those of you who don't live in Cape Town, there are large double-decker, red double-decker buses with the open top deck for tourists. This is about one of them. The bus rolls slowly through the city traffic, passing aged buildings and the crowds, to cross the mountains, green and gold with summer, circling back along the sparkling sea as occupants snap photos, sunlit on the open upper deck, and gesturing to sights that they'll remember when they're home, of life where life was hidden from the world. And those they pass, while busy with their days, might wonder for a moment what they see, of life that's lived amid a history, beneath the brilliance of a southern sun, in which to holiday. The bus rolls on, between car guards directing cars in place, between the craggy mountains to the sea, and life is seen and worthy to be seen. And then the last poem, I've been reading quite a lot of Persian poetry and translation. This is inspired by The Conference of the Birds by Attar of Nishapur, translated by Shole Volpe. It's a fascinating poem, but I disagree with the quietism of it, the sense of renunciation. And this is a poem for the nightingale in the poem, to tell him that he was on the right path, the path of love and art. To Attar's nightingale. Begins with a quote from the poem, spoken by the hoopoe, the wisest of all the birds. Don't presume the road is short. Many oceans and deserts lie between the beloved and us. Nightingale, wait. Don't take this path through suffering to silence. Turn and fly swiftly to your rose. She waits for you. She trembles in her garden for your song. You have your wisdom. Call the coral colors from her depths. Flutter gracefully amid the thorns that guard her from the world. Tell her of her beauty. She's alone. Be brave and comfort her as petals fade. Although the winds are soft and sunlight gentle in the garden, sing as when you sang and she awoke, her sepals damp with dew, and sing of colours none but you would find, so she will know them, casting piping notes across the towns, across the listening land, where they will come to rest, as soft as petals. Thank you.
Can we please all unmute and give this beautiful reading a round of applause? Stuart, that was amazing.
Thanks very much.
I felt I was moved particularly by Revolutions and Mulberry. Those they resonated with me strongly. Yes, and I'd like to open this conversation up to the room. Are there any comments or questions in the room? There are some comments in the group from Christine, who enjoyed a particular poem, and she says, what a beautiful reading. And Fiona, beautiful Stuart, thank you. Jacques, the floor is yours.
That was such a beautiful reading. I loved it, and I wanted to ask something about doubt, because there's something very haunting about the uncertainty. What I read as uncertainty, I wonder if you agree with me, but the uncertainty of being able to have conversations with the dead. And I often think of that question that Stuart Payne asks. He says that the words will endure even though the world is diminished. And then he asks, is that not so? And depending on how I hear that, it's either it's a rhetorical question or it isn't.
Yes.
And there's something moving about that for me, that courage in that doubt. Would you agree? Do you want to say something about that?
I think, yes, I agree with you. I do feel that doubt, both in our ability to reach one another, and in the ability of poetry to continue to pass that on to future generations if they don't have any basis on which to develop a greater understanding. In the same way that we hear ancient Greek music and it's just exotic to us, we don't generally hear the beauty that they would have heard in the tiny notes. That there is a fear that this whole world in which I'm writing will also be lost and can't be understood without reference to that world, that the poems rely on their world for understanding, yes, despite all our pretensions to create something outside life. It is very dependent, yes.
I mean, I find the poems incredibly courageous. For me, they bring fragments of lost worlds, and for me, they answer that question. That it is possible. So it's kind of because you carry that doubt. The poems are strong, and they're stronger for that.
Thank you.
There's faith there. Yeah. No, thank you.
Thank you, Jacques. I think that was really interesting. Gave me a lot to. And there's a comment from Patricia in the chat. She's carried away by the lyricism of your rhymes and images. And there's
thank you.
And then a message from Stephanie, who loved listening to your poems. And I agree. I think there is a lyricism there that is in the way you also read the poems. And yeah, I enjoyed that. Douglas, the floor is yours.
I was curious to know why you chose that particular quote from one of my poems. The poem, by the way, is called The Road to Pego, which is in Spain. Is it? Oh, it's not. It's the oranges.
Picking oranges.
Picking oranges.
It sparked the idea of the importance of our experience, of our well, seeing in inverted commas or hearing a world, that each of us creates something in doing so. I think that's the positive side of the dots, that each of us does create a world that wouldn't exist without us, that we can polish, we can work on through art or science or whatever, which is the positive side to the fear that we can't reach beyond that individual world. And that quote sparks the idea of the necessity of just being there. That being there makes something happen.
It's kind of interesting how ideas evolve or mutate in the chain of in the chains of conversation and transit and cross-reference. And the idea, to me, I mean, at the time of writing, I was reading a lot about physics and reading a lot about the development of physics in the first third of the 20th century. And the idea refers to, I'll probably get into trouble from Elisa here, but it refers to the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, where Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg were involved in various exchanges with other physicists on how to understand quantum mechanics, because so clearly, whenever they observed phenomena in the subatomic world, it changed. And the conclusion that some of them came to was, forget about the philosophy, just calculate, because the calculations of quantum mechanics were accurate in the world and provided an extraordinary mechanism for understanding aspects of the world. But at the same time, it was left lingering. You know, what is this? What is this world in which, when we look, it changes the world? Your seeing changes everything. And I remember listening to Brian Cox, the British physics village explainer, talking about how whenever a quark in the universe is, or whenever an electron in the universe is displaced from one energy shell into another energy shell of an atom, and these are vanishingly tiny entities, it causes every other electron in the universe to shuffle up and shuffle around because of the law of conservation of energy. So everything has to, like one's sums at nursery school, it has to balance out. The equation has to balance. So that was my thinking around it, and it was kind of the source of the poem and the quote. But it so interests me how such a quotation, such a line with that sort of hidden background can be taken up by someone else and embellished and recontextualized and repurposed. And so that sort of brings me back to one of my notions that everything we do is translation. Everything we do in language is a kind of translation. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes. Thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah. Is there any, would you like to respond to that, Stuart, or you?
Yes. I did think about subatomic levels.
Mary
and how
Edwards to everyone. Could we hear that poem again, please?
What?
Sorry, it's a comment in the chat from Mary. Mary asks to hear that poem again, please.
Which poem?
The one that we are currently talking about, but the one
Oh,
that taken Douglas.
That's
But I think the notion of
There it is.
everything that we do is translatable makes sense. Yes, go ahead, Stuart.
Your seeing changes everything. Picking oranges. Ducks are rootling grass still damp with dew, as sunlight glows from a cloudless sky, gleaming on the leaves of cup of gold that tremble around a false acacia's frame. I play no part, but this would not have been were I not here to glimpse the peaceful scene. I watch them pace beside a garden wall, busy in their vivid tactile world beneath hibiscus, open to the sun, as morning's chatter drifts among the trees. I play no part, but this would not have been were I not here to glimpse the peaceful scene.
Mm.
And I did think about subatomic levels and how the feeling that by creating it in my mind did feel almost as if I was influencing what I was seeing, although I knew logically that couldn't be. But I did, yes. I did have that feeling.
All righty. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, Stuart. And Elisa has said also beautiful reading, Stuart. Thank you. And I think I concur. This reading was just such a joy. It was so beautiful to be here and listen. It was so redundant to call a poetry reading poetic, but it was poetic. Can we please give Stuart one last round of applause and we can take a break?
Mary Edwards to everyone. The observed effect. You do influence what you see.
So that's a message from Mary. The observed effect you do influences what you see. I'm not sure why it's repeating things on the chat, but okay. So everybody will take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back for an open mic session.
Denise Drabkin has left the meeting. Ed has left the meeting.